Canada long before the American Revolution. There were hardly any white people in Canada. There was nothing but Indians and beasts. Many a deer I have helped catch on the lakes in a canoe. And one year, we caught 90. I was already a grown woman when the first governor of Canada came to England. His name, Governor Simcoe. My parents were slaves. And one day, my master's son-in-law, Daniel Outwaters, and Simon Knox came into the garden where my sister and I were playing. They tied their handkerchiefs over our mouths, carried us to a vessel, put us in the hold, and sailed up the river. I know not how far nor how long. It was dark there all the time. I remember when we came to Genesee, there was Indian settlements. There were Onondagas, Senecas, and Oneidas. I guess that I was the first colored girl brought into Canada. The white men then sold us at the Niagara to old Indian Brant, the king. Brant lived part of the time at Mohawk, part at Ancaster, part at Preston, then called the lower block. The upper block was at Snyder's Mill. While I lived with old Brant, we caught deer. We would let the hounds loose when we'd hear them bark, and Brant's daughters, Peggy, Mary, Katie, and I, we would run for the canoe. And his sons, John, Joseph, Jacob, would wait at the shore to kill the deer while we fetched them in. I had a tomahawk, and I would hit the deer on the head. The squaws would then take up the horns and paddle ashore. The boys would bleed and skin the deer and take the meat to the house. Sometimes, white people, our neighbors, John Chisholm and Bill Chisholm, they would come and say 'twas their hound and they must have the meat, but we would not let them have it. Canada was then filling up with white people. When Brant went to England and kissed the Queen's hand, he was made colonel. Then there was a lot of laws in Canada. Brant was only half Indian. His mother was a squaw, and he was good looking, a portly man. He was as big as Jim Douglas, who lived here in the bush and weighed 200 pounds. He lived in an Indian village, and when white men came among them, they were intermarried. They had an English schoolmaster, an English preacher, and an English blacksmith. When Brant went among the English, he wore English dress. And when he was among the Indians, he wore Indian dress, broadcloth, moccasins, and a fur cap. He had his ears slit with a long loop, and in these he hung long silver ornaments. He wore a silver half moon on his chest with the king's name on it, and a broad silver bracelets on his arms. Brant was always making peace amongst his people. I used to talk Indian better than I speak English. I've forgotten how to do it now. Brant's third wife, she was my mistress. She was a barbarous creature. She would talk to me. She could talk English, but she would not talk to me in English. She would tell me in Indian to do things and then hit me with anything her hands came to. I didn't understand her. I even have a scar in my head from the wound she gave me with a hatchet. And a long scar over my eye is where she cut me with a knife. The skin dropped over my eyes, and a white woman bound it. Brant was so angry when he got home that he punished her as if she were a child. He said, "You know I adopted her as one of my family, and now you're trying to put all the work on her." Brant had 2 colored men for slaves. One of them was the father of John Patton, and the other called himself Simon Gainesfield. There was another Indian that I knew of who owned a slave. But for me, I had no care to get my freedom. At 12 years old, I was sold by Brant for $100 to Samuel Hatt, an Englishman in Ancaster. I lived with him 7 years. And when the white people said that I was free, and they put me up to running away, he didn't stop me. He said he would not take the law into his own hands. I then lived what is now called Waterloo. I married Robert Pooley, a black man. Robert ran away with a white woman. He's dead. Brant died 2 years before the Second War with the United States. His wife survived him, and now